number one factor in determining the price? Comps, improvements, or anything else?
Well, what I'd like to do is reference an article that I pulled off. It is an article that first appeared in the Appraiser Coach by Dustin Harris. I pulled it off of Appraisal Buzz, but it gives a really good explanation of price versus value. Three simple definitions for price, cost, and value. Price is the amount of money that is being asked for a good or service, but the key word is asked. It may not be reality. The cost is what a buyer will be willing to pay for a good or service. Value is the amount when a buyer and seller agree upon in a marketplace. Price and cost of a well-informed buyer and seller that they mutually agree to. So as far as the question referencing what is the number one factor determining price, I almost think it's value more than anything. And I think the key thing is that the comparables will let you know what are the main determining prices that will help support value into a particular house when people are buying.
New construction appraisals, they're not coming in at value, especially when upgrades have been added. And then are you guys taking into account the recent tariff increases on cost of materials on construction homes?
I haven't noticed so much on the tariff increases. I think building costs have increased over the past 2 to 3 years. I think there's still a short supply of builders. And when you have prices that exceed what the market bears in existing housing prices, we can see a differentiation between new construction and existing home sales. Generally, we're using historical data to estimate values, along with cost approach in a new home situation. And sometimes that's where we see the difference. The existing home sales and the cost to build are just different. And situations where that doesn't happen might be a neighborhood where a builder is the only builder in the neighborhood. And those are our sales comparables. And we see the market purchasing homes at that price, and we may have less, there may be less differentiation between an existing home sale and a new home sale in a neighborhood like that. But I believe there's almost always been somewhat of a premium when someone chooses to go through the process of building a home and picking out the doorknobs and the faucets. And quite often I see there can be a gap of 10% sometimes, or whatever that might be, whatever it might be in that market. But I've always kind of considered that's the cost of choice and fulfilling a life dream of building a home, quite possibly.
What is the difference between an appraisal management company and a panel? Is the appraiser in closer contact to the lender when it is a panel?
Two-part question. As far as appraiser independence is concerned, the answer to the second part of this is the appraiser in closer contact to the lender when it's a panel would tell you, although they might be familiar and know the people, the contact between the appraiser and the loan officer still is distant as it should be. So that part of it. But what I'd like to do is first make sure everybody understands the difference between an appraisal management company and a panel. The appraisal management company is a third-party entity that develops the fee panel and then orders the appraisal on behalf of the lender. So it's a third party. The appraisal goes from point A to point B to point C, C being the lender, B being the appraisal management company. A panel is done when the appraisal management company is substituted for an electronic distribution system, appraisal port, Mercury Network, Encompass. Those are a few that I know where a lending institution will go to them and say, I would like you to distribute the appraisals. They don't select the appraisers. The panel is done and selected by the management of the lending institution. Dodd-Frank clearly says that a panel may not be put together by those agents in production. That would be the loan officers, so they don't have anything to do. However, your bosses, your board of directors can go through and pick a panel in your particular county and territory and then submit that to the electronic system, and they will rotate them. So there is no appraisal management company. Underwriting is done, the appraisal is looked at by underwriting alone. And in a management company, the appraisal is looked at certainly by the appraiser first, then the AMC, the appraisal management company, and then the lending institution. And it's a process becoming more and more popular, because even though the loan officers don't get a chance to pick the panel, the local hierarchy of the bank can select the panel based on his or her knowledge of the appraisers in the area. So in some cases like that, you tend to get more local appraisers, where a fee panel out of New Jersey might cast a net over Southwest Michigan and pick a number of appraisers and rotate them. I've done both. So it's I'm not going to say my preference one way or the other. The answer to the last question is the relationship between I'll say this again, the relationship between the appraiser and the loan officer is similar in both. Neither have any contact with regard to value. The relationship, however, with a local base, there's not the center, there's not B. The appraiser goes from the appraiser directly to the lender, underwriting. So there's no, there's no ball dropping, there's no disinterested, there's no third party who doesn't know your territory. So those that choose that can tend to think it works quicker, it works a little better, and it's still in conformance to Dodd-Frank. So appraisal management companies came in right after Dodd-Frank was initiated, so because lenders were very, very afraid that they were going to be out of compliance, and the fine for being out of compliance for appraiser independence is stiff. And after 10 years, there hasn't been one infraction. Dodd-Frank, to my knowledge, has not found any lending institution being in violation of how they order appraisals. And the electronic panels have been here for 10 years, and they're being used more and more. I hope that explains it. Is it clear? Did I make it clear to you?
Yeah, I mean, we personally use Encompass.
Okay.
Excuse me, and I know as far as our processors go, it's really made things a lot easier.
Right. And the ordering process is done with a keystroke, order the appraisal, and it's distributed within the panel of appraisers that have been selected, not by you, but by those on a different, those who aren't paid based on what they close. And that's the way Dodd-Frank first said. We don't want people ordering the appraisals who get paid based on how many they close. So this has to be made, and so the argument was, well, that's true, but you still have to be careful to not select an appraiser from Jackson to come to Millwood and do an appraisal. How do we figure that? And they've been struggling with that, and that's why you see more lending institutions using the electronic methods. You use Encompass, and there's Mercury Network, and there's a half a dozen of them that will come in and set you up so that either you can use the system, you can have people employed to distribute your appraisals, or you can have the loan officers hit F1 to order the appraisal, and it goes into the system, and it ends up Manny gets the appraisal assignment. So it's a good alternative, and probably as an appraiser and being on all sides, it's probably a good backstop to ensure that you're going to get local appraisers.
So kind of a follow-up question to that would be, what would you say is your geographical area of expertise into where you don't feel comfortable giving a good appraisal on a property?
It's funny, when I started Midwest Appraisal Management Company years ago, we had appraisers as we were distributing, for instance, in Ohio. I'll never forget this one, an appraiser called in and said that he covered the west half of Ohio. And of course, as an appraiser, I'm wondering, I wouldn't cover the west half of Michigan. How can you do that? And when I explained to him what he had to have, you have to have a knowledge of the neighborhoods, a knowledge of the school systems, a knowledge of preference of buyers and sellers, the lake properties within there. Would you like to reconsider? And he came back and said, okay, I'll cover 4 counties if that's the criteria. And that, from that, we developed a system that all of our appraisers couldn't cover more than 4 counties. That's just a benchmark we used. In Kentucky, where the counties are this big, you expand it, but in my comfort level, when I was doing many more appraisals than I am now, I would cover 4.5 counties. But when you see an appraiser that's covering 10 or 12 counties, that's a lot of knowledge to have to know the difference between the school systems in Battle Creek, for instance. So personally, I cover 2 counties, parts of 3, but in most appraisers, how many do you cover?
Probably closer to 5,
Yeah.
but
You're in a bit more rural
along the
area.
lake though,
Mhm.
you know, so I get, right there is Van Buren, Allegan,
Right,
Ottawa, and sometimes up
Right.
in Muskegon, there's 4,
right,
and that's all like Michigan, same market, so.
right.
I will tell you that Lakeshore Realtors get on edge when the lenders say we're sending a Kalamazoo appraiser out there. They get a little touchy about it. Do you guys feel that there is a difference between you appraising homes on the lakeshore? Do you not feel as comfortable doing the lakeshore properties, or is it you're comfortable with it, you've done it for years?
I'm pretty comfortable with it. I mean, I actually own property in South Haven, so I spend a lot of time over in that area.
You have to be, you have to, you sign the appraisal form that says you are familiar with the area and you have done appraisals in that neighborhood, in that area. It became, appraisal management companies, when they were first installed and used, it kind of gave a bad name to a lot of that happening, because a lot of the appraisers were coming from areas that they had not done before. It is extremely important that the appraiser recognize what we call a complex appraisal, which means that this is going to take a lot more work, a lot more time. An $800,000 new build in rural Berry County is a complex assignment. For me, a complex assignment is doing something on the lakeshore. For these guys, it's not. I wouldn't take one over there. I don't have any idea what lakeshore goes for per front foot. And so when you have an appraiser, it's important to ask the questions if you can. You know, if you normally work in this area? I have a license in Florida. And Pinellas County is where Clearwater and all those areas are. There are appraisers over there who only cover the north half of Pinellas County. For them to cover 3 counties would be incomprehensible. They absolutely couldn't do it. LA appraisers, for instance, might cover 7 or 8 neighborhoods. Detroit, for instance, when you drop a 4 county, when somebody's over in Wayne County, that's too much. But in Gladwin, is that what I'm thinking of? In northern Michigan, in Gaylord, for instance, you might cover 5 counties because you have to. So there's no one right answer, but somebody can't cover the half of Ohio or the north half of Michigan.
Certain situations where an appraiser gains a certain level of expertise, maybe they appraise hobby horse farms, residences, barns, stables, tack rooms, those sorts of things, riding arenas. And if that's your specialty, you may have a larger coverage area. But those are unique, complex assignments too that kind of fall outside the norm.
A complex assignment means that your selection of comparable sales has to come from a different market. When you're appraising a 203-acre, 8,000 square foot home in southern Indiana, your market isn't just southern Indiana. Your market might very well be, the type of buyer who's going to come in and live in there for the summer. So your comparable sales might come from 2 or 3 states. And that seems hard to believe, but a $4 million house on Lake Michigan might not be just the lake shore of Lake Michigan. It might be the entire Lake Michigan shoreline and around to Wisconsin. So as an appraiser goes, the assignments that you get for lending institutions of the 3-bedroom ranch and Portage versus something like that are entirely different.